You cut me loose and set me free. You make me win in every way. You showed me how to spread my wings. Yes, I'm the winner of the day. You cut me loose and set me free. You make me win in every way.
All right. Hey, we're back. It's good to see you, Andy. Always happy for our time together.
Yes.
Here we are in our third of 3 parts talking about connected culture, people, process, and profits. Today we wanted to focus on connecting solutions. So how cultivating a problem-solving workforce, of course, impacts the bottom line.
Yeah.
And I love how you talk about a problem-solving workforce. That was a great tagline. When I first heard you say it, I was like, oh, she's brilliant. So tell me, what does a problem-solving workforce mean to you?
Wow. I mean, somewhat of a loaded question. I think sort of, for me, I think a problem-solving workforce is really a workforce that's empowered, right? It's taking all of the pressure off of one group, usually leadership, and spreading that out across the organization. So I think that's one of the great pieces about a problem-solving workforce. I think the other piece that is really important is that piece about empowering employees. The people doing the work are the people who know how to do this work the best. And so in the end, you know, I think you and I have both been leaders in organizations, and in my opinion, a lot of where the mistakes happen are when leaders believe they know as much because maybe they even used to be the person that did this stuff.
Yeah.
But it's like, you're not doing it anymore. You're removed from it. And so for me as leaders, it's really around emboldening, removing barriers, and really allowing your team to provide that feedback on how we can do things better, be better, you know, solve problems in the end.
Yeah. So I love that. There's so many things that you said that stand out for me, of course, around empowering people, how to remove the fear, you know, and I think a lot of it stems from fear that if I speak up or if I share an idea, I'm going to perceived as dumb. You know, this is all the sabotaging voice, our imposter giving us these stories, you know, but also fear on the side of leaders too, right? Like, I am paid here to have the job and have all the answers.
Yeah.
And what we talk more about now is, no, you don't. Hire the smart people and have humility, right? Know that you don't know all the answers, and that's okay. That's not why you're paid the big bucks. There's other wonderful skills that got you in the job.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. This sort of goes into that value structure conversation. I think we had this last time where we talked about busy being the value structure. And I think this also goes along with that as leaders. Exactly what you said is that so many times, I think leaders try to hold on to all of this stuff because they feel like, if somebody else is doing it, I'm not doing my job. If somebody else is doing it, I'm not adding value or driving value. And I think for me, what I try to teach leaders is when you have an empowered team that's executing all of this stuff, your work is to make sure that they can run this stuff free and clear, right? You're gonna have to go back up and get money from people, and you're gonna have to go back up and say, hey, calm down. We're doing this down here. We're trying and testing. That's your role. It's not to be the person in the front getting it all done. It's much, you know, as a leader, your roles are much more nuanced now than that. And you had mentioned in the organization this idea of being able to have this voice, right? Well, guess what? The other role of the leader is to make sure people can have a voice. That you've created an environment that's comfortable for people to say stupid things, because quite frankly, we're probably all going to say them. How do we, you know, the intent is to create the space that allows for saying something stupid or doing something stupid or making a mistake, right? That's really good.
And I think we talked about this too in our first session on psychological safety, right? So how are you cultivating that environment, creating the space, letting people know, or creating a learner growth mindset? And a lot of that is role modeling, right? Saying the off the wall thing, saying, I don't know where this lands, but this is what's coming to mind. And, you know, we do spend a lot of time with disclaimers and probably over functioning, but how I've tried to shift my mindset as my sabotaging voice or, you know, negative self-talk goes, if you say that, they're going to think you're dumb. You know, oh my gosh, that's not even connected. You don't know. And I've always been in roles where I'm not the subject matter expert in the room, you know,
Right.
because my background's more in like project management, report operations, you know, tech, where like I've got knowledge around this piece, but not necessarily around the business function. And what I've tried to tell myself is, no, you have a unique perspective then.
Right.
You know, you're thinking about stuff differently than anybody else, right? And this is where diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging all come in on, do you feel like you can share your perspective? Nobody grew up the same way that I did or had the same experience that I have that led me to this spot right now. So that in and of itself gives me a unique perspective. And also just trying to change my mindset to think, whatever I say, it might not be the end all be all or the right answer, but it might generate another thought in somebody else.
Oh man. And that really is it. I think that we feel like we have to have the answer, and it's not. We're just contributing to the conversation. Yeah. We're contributing to the opportunity. It is a funny thing, because I think we've created a culture that says we have to always, oh, here we go. We have to always be perfect, or we have to always be right. And so we will avoid saying anything that might be considered wrong or bad or different. But when we talk about this in terms of problem solving, sometimes the most obvious stuff, people are flying out and saying, oh, we're going to do this and this and this and this and this is all the stuff that's been done before. But where's the innovation and creativity in that? Right? Sometimes we have to be, I think, a little bit curious in the, I'm going to take this off the wall idea, right? And I think as leaders, actually, that's sometimes what we can do. I know for me, when I've done consulting in the past, it's like, okay, let's take the list of all the things you think, like for example, when you're root causing, these are all the things you think are the problem. Yeah. What possibly could be the other stuff? Let's just talk about, right? Let's, oh, I know you don't have enough staff. I know people aren't trained. I know, you know,
never enough time, never enough resources. Yeah,
there's all that. What else could be going on? And almost forcing people to get into this uncomfortable space of, there's no way that could be it, but I don't care. You just say it anyway, right?
Yeah.
And those are the nuggets where you find, holy moly, we didn't think about this piece. That now, you know, when you start to think about, you get technical with problem solving, Pareto charts, and what's causing the most stuff, and, you know, what's going to have the biggest impact, all that stuff. And you start to realize, man, nobody's been thinking about this thing. We keep talking about hiring more people, but the reality is this little piece of technology here isn't working, or we're making people get up 17 times to go print something they don't need to print, or whatever. And it's like, solve that thing. And now guess what? It's making everything a lot simpler.
Now we're all free with, now we can spend our time elsewhere.
You didn't need to stack your labor costs.
Totally. You mentioned something in there and I just lost my train of thought, but it'll come back to me.
The idea about being curious and needing to go that direction.
And maybe that was it. But around like being as a project manager, as a young project manager, what I think was one of my greatest strengths was I really didn't know. Yes. So asking questions, and I would say, well, I'm playing devil's advocate, you know, and I think that is, and I probably didn't need the disclaimer around it, but I think that is one of the things that made me successful, because I would ask the questions that then would make people challenge their assumptions, or even identify their assumptions. That was it. It was around assumptions. So what? Came back full circle. You know, what are the assumptions that we're making? Because when you do exercises like like you're describing, tell me what other things it could possibly be, or can't even possibly be, but you've thought about, right?
Yeah.
Then people start to think about, oh, I just made an assumption about this, that, and the other. And that's usually the kiss of death, right? It's all those assumptions we make. But also in brainstorming, right, to call those out and be like mindful of them. Again, that, why did you assume that? Well, that's not what I was assuming, and we skip a whole bunch of steps. So even when we're talking about the simple things that are happening, or the simple, the common ideas, it's like, well, is that a common idea? Because it is to me, but it might not be to you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's funny because I like going in as a consultant who doesn't understand the business. You have a general framework around what's going on, but I like to be someone who doesn't understand. And what I always say to leaders when we get in these discovery meetings is, listen, I'm not challenging you. I'm literally dumb in this. So as I ask you questions, it's really to build my own knowledge base. And when I ask about a process and why you're doing it that way, and if that would make sense, it's not to challenge you and challenge that this process is bad. It's to hopefully help you think through, well, do we really need to do it that way? Right. Or is it this is just the pattern of the way we've always done it?
We've always done it.
It is a weird thing trying to push people into a growth mindset, isn't it?
Well, and that's why it's a mindset, right? Because you really have to believe it. You have to find a way to tell yourself, like, yeah, this is what it's for, right? This is why I do it. And if you don't believe that, if you don't embody that, then it's just talk, right? It's rhetoric. I actually had a boss who like totally did this. Like, she learned all the things and was like, so just tell me more, and she would ask questions, but you knew she had the answer already. She already had an answer. And so there's a little bit too of emotional intelligence that comes into play. People like actually thinking that you are curious and that you are coming at it open-minded, humble, and these are still things that can be practiced, but you can also get feedback on that too. Right?
No, it's funny. I know we keep talking about assumptions, but assumptions are really often what drive poor solutioning to problems, right?
Yeah.
I worked at a company once where their motto was keep your elevator at curious. And it's so interesting. Like, if you can walk into this meeting where, to your point, you were talking about your boss knowing the answer. Even if you believe, you believe strongly, the answer, being curious so that you're asking the right questions often brings in things that, again, you just never even thought about.
And for sure, it's one thing to have a point of view, right? That is what you want from folks, to have a point of view, have a perspective, have an opinion, so we're not all coming in going like, well, I don't know, what do you think? I don't care, what do you think? Like there has to be some light under that fire there. Right. But at the same time, like you said, having some humility and the curiosity around to say, well, what else can I learn about this particular topic? What else can I learn about the experience? What else can I learn about the person just sharing their point of view?
Right.
So maybe you totally don't agree with their point of view, but you are getting more insight into who they are, what their values are, strengths,
how they think, how they process information, all of that.
Love it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that probably, in my experience, is the key factor in creating a problem-solving culture, is that no matter what, everyone is just always being curious, right? And I think it does start with the leader. So I can remember working with a group where the frontline leaders, they would look at their reports and then based on their reports, believed that now they can go and have a conversation with folks about what they needed to do or change. And I remember saying to them, well, data is one part.
That's a piece of the conversation.
It tells a piece of the story, but you're not getting the full picture. So how interesting and how different would your conversation, because obviously when she went to the employee, to talk about missed productivity.
Explain this to me.
It was an accusation, right?
Right.
She was assuming the person wasn't working hard enough or whatever. And the reality was the person had been struggling with their equipment. But now, by the time she went to go have the conversation with the person, it was an attack.
Yeah,
and now the person's defensive.
Yeah.
And now we've gotten nowhere, right? And now we've taken more time, we've spent more money, really, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I said to her, hey, if you would have gone in and said, I noticed that you used to do this, and now we're seeing this, what's happened? Is there something I can help you with? Did something go wrong? Those are curious questions that leaders
and kind. I'm here to help.
And kind, because as leaders, what is our role? We're here to help. We are barrier removers. That is the job. That is the job. My job is to make sure as a leader that you can be as successful today as possible. That's it. Whatever else you think, if you think it's sitting in meetings all day, if you think you're a great leader because you hit your productivity numbers, if you your team hit
your team hit your productivity numbers.
Yeah, I'm like, your team hit the productivity numbers, but they're all quitting after a month or 6 months or whatever it is, right? So it's an interesting thing, I think, when leaders can go into a space curious. I'm like, how different this conversation is, how much less time you're now going to spend. And oh, by the way, this person wasn't slacking off all day. Their computer wasn't working, and they've been trying to call IT and trying to do this. And because you weren't present or there, you didn't even know that. You looked at a spreadsheet, and felt like you got all.
Again, showing the importance of connecting with people. All right, it's all about connecting and being with folks and knowing what's happening in your organization. Yeah. No, and I think it also, what you're showing also demonstrates the importance of role modeling, right? Our role as leaders, the biggest thing you can do is role model the behavior. We say all the things, but until you're actually showing up that way, role modeling, sharing the benefits, what it means to you, that's where the impact is. And the flip side of that too, and yes, we need leaders to help cultivate and create space for folks. And we also need people to, what I heard someone say, be psychologically brave, right? Yes. So there is a flip side to that. And we can't always expect that our leaders do all the things. We know that some are not able to, and some are not capable. So how can you, leading at all levels, leading from where you sit, have some bravery to say, okay, what can I do to be curious, right? And how do you make that the responsibility of the team? And I think there's lots of ways to do that. I know you've seen good stuff. Like when I sat on a leadership team, we made it a point that we had to ask 2 questions. A topic came up, and at least 2 questions needed to be asked, right? Whatever they were. Maybe it was a slam dunk issue, but always 2 questions. Yeah. And just having that be part of the cycle generated more questions, right? Now we're in a dialogue. Right. Not just the past.
And isn't that the point?
Isn't that the point?
We really want to have a dialogue. Yeah. And the broader the dialogue, I think, the broader the dialogue, the more we get. I'm sorry, my brain started to go back to psychological bravery. And it's so funny because you have psychological safety, which you need the leaders to set the foundation for. And then you have psychological bravery that really sits with employees, right? Sits with the workforce. And so isn't it interesting how one group it's not one group doing one thing or the other. It really is this collective. When we can create that, when those 2 things are in play, we're getting these amazing dialogues. We don't have to have difficult conversations.
We're having conversations.
Just have conversations. We recognize that we don't always agree on things. And going back to goal setting, because we know we're all heading towards the same true north, we're now having this discussion, this dialogue on the best way to get there. And so I think both of those pieces, the psychological safety and the psychological bravery, and I'll add a third maybe, cognitive diversity, really respecting and understanding that people have differences of thoughts and opinions. And nothing sits in a good or bad space. It just sits in its space. I think when you have those three things and those are hitting on all cylinders, this is where I would call you have a high performing organization. You're easily and quickly solving problems. You're getting to resolutions that you're testing and trying. The ones that don't work, you're dropping off. And the ones that are working, you're constantly looking at and evaluating to make sure that they're continuing to work, right? And so and
that's a process you set up, right? That is a very tangible thing you do every quarter, whatever, and not getting into this doesn't work, but we've invested so much effort in it already. Let's keep trying to make it work. Right?
I say that drives me nuts.
Let that go. Yeah.
I had a great CEO, Scott, great CEO. And he used to say, fail fast. Like, fail fast. Do it. If it's working, great. If it's not, don't continue. Don't keep investing in that. Don't hang on to these things because it was your idea. It was my idea. And so now I'm gonna fit this round, circle into this square peg, no matter how hard I try.
Yeah. Like, I'm so personally invested. Fail fast, fail forward.
But why are you going to be personally? It's failing. It's failing. Don't be personally invested in failure. Yeah. Recognize that that's the thing, and can you tweak it to move it in a progressive manner? If not, ditch it. Don't waste any time on it. Same is true, I think, with this getting to this perfect state. So I'm going to work on this project. And I'm going to work on this project. And now we're 24 months into this project and not a single thing is executed because it's not quite perfect.
I've got to tweak it. And this cracks me up. I'm so glad you brought this up. So the last group that I was with, this was the thing, right? Everybody was like getting everything to 110%. And newsflash, it was never 110%. The culture, like, it doesn't work that way. Everybody wants to put their 2 cents in, and for good reason. Diversity of thought, but also because people want to feel some ownership on what's happening too, right? So now we're all connected and we're in alignment and invested in what's happening. So we all want to put our 2 cents in it. But when we brought up this notion of good enough, like, what is good enough? How do you get it out there? Huge backlash. My work is not good enough. I'm an A+ student. How dare you tell me to just do something good enough? And it was fascinating. I don't agree with it. Like, I feel like we need to do a better, and what that said to me was we need to do a better job of defining what success looks like. Success is not, you nailed it and nobody had any questions. That's the opposite, right?
This is probably slightly off topic, but this goes back to just the idea that everybody should be A students. I'm like, no, really, everyone should be C students.
Yeah, that's
that's the bulk of the bell.
Successful.
That's the bulk of the bell. If everyone is, and that is the problem that we're in today, right? I know when I was in school, it was like, bring home A's, bring home A's, bring home A's, bring home A's. And it was like, so I have to be exceptional at every single solitary subject. I can't be with the rest of the population.
Yeah.
It's an
I didn't have that same problem. I mean, I put that onto myself, but my parents were like, you got to be, yay, good job, you. I mean, I think what I got more in trouble for was if I didn't get an A in gym or music, because then that means you just didn't show up.
Yeah.
It's like, well, reading, whatever, you don't get the book, whatever. But you got to show up.
If you don't know how to read, then that's okay. No.
Okay, that's a problem. But I didn't, if I just basically scooted by on Wuthering Heights, that was all right.
Yeah.
But not showing up, not being active, not contributing to the class, which is really what the gym grade is. That's not okay.
And right? I think that's indicative of life, right? So it's and maybe that was partially my mom, and she was like, I know when you're giving effort and when you're not giving effort. And to be honest, my mom was not like a bring home A's or you're grounded. Like my mom was not that person. But I have people in my family that are like that. I'll tell you that much. And I have to be like, yo, everybody's not perfect at everything.
Right.
And it's creating an unreasonable expectation for that person, i.e.,
show up in the workforce.
Yeah, like I don't just get stuff done. And it's like, well, sometimes the end state is not. The end state isn't always to get the glory.
Yeah. Well, it's
sometimes the end state is just progress.
Right.
It's just being a little better than before.
So yeah, for sure. So I was coaching somebody just this morning and we were talking about her brand and her values. And she said, delivering excellence. And I said, okay, like, what does that mean? We go into it. And I said, because everybody has a different view of what that means. So like, let's define this more. And what she ended up with was it was all about process improvement, doing 1% better, leaving something better than when she first found it. And I'm like, not only do I love that, I mean, I love it, but that is not what resonates with folks on delivering excellence, right? That's the A+ exceptional thing that people go to when they hear excellence, and that's not what it means for you, and that might not even be what it means within your organization,
right?
So I just thought it was fascinating, right? And exactly to your point, like it's not the A+ we're after. What is it that we're actually after?
Oh, I love that. I think that is the question. Okay, here's the note. Always ask the question, what are we trying to accomplish? What do we really want to do? And I think you mentioned this earlier in what does success actually look like?
Yeah, that's my number one question with all clients when we start anything. Whether it's just for the session, that's a pretty typical coaching question, right? What does success look like when you do XYZ, when you hit that? Yep. And we should be asking each other that all the time, right? And maybe also that's part of what you do in meetings. That's part of the cultural norms that you have, even setting somebody to have that role. When I used to do agendas, it was like, we would even have a role for the person who had that job. So in this topic, you're the question asker.
Yeah.
You're name it whatever you want. You're the thorn picker. You're the rose butter, you're the you're the devil's advocate, whatever it is, whatever cute name you come up with in your org. I am not a marketing guru, although that was my major. That you have that role, right? So it takes a little bit of, you still get the work done, you still get that mindset going, right? You still try and flex that muscle, make it part of the culture, build it in, but you have somebody where it's not personal, right? We've assigned you this role to be the question asker, and then again, that starts to create the dialogue. Right.
I think that's a good tip to get started on that, because I think
there's lots of ways to ease your way into it, either identifying the person or setting up some rules about, we're going to ask 2 questions, 3 questions, whatever. But you have a lot of good ideas around like innovative think tanks and other things.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that, and again, I tend to work with a lot of leaders. And so, it's always how the leader's showing up, right? And so for me, you get into these sessions where you're trying to figure out a thing. And, let's just take the example of something didn't go right. And I think if you want to set the stage for people feeling free and being able to ask these questions and really creating a better dialogue, I think that as leaders, there is this, we have to ask, we should be positioning this as, what can I have done differently? Yeah. Or what do you need from me? Or what do you need me to do differently now? Or whatever that series of, but it starts with the person who is sort of, I use leader a lot, but it could be a program manager, right? It could be this phase of this project is not heading down the direction it needs to go. What do you need me to do differently, team, to help get us back on the right track, or to make sure we don't have this situation again? And I think it doesn't just have to be leaders. It really can translate to anybody in any setting. Begin with what this level of self-reflection on what you're doing and what you can do differently. It is humility. I like to push it from a leader perspective, because then they can set the stage that it's okay of whatever's going to be said, right? We're all going to be supportive and caring of one another and kind to one another as we work through, what we don't want to happen, for sure, and then what we do want to happen.
Yeah. And what we want to happen is to have connected cultures, connecting process, all connecting profits, getting those business results. Right, that's what we're in the business for. So, but it all starts with connecting. Yeah. Well, this was so fun, as always. So energizing to chat with you. I just love our times and all the brilliance that comes out from us. So
let's
I hope this was as much fun for you as it was for me, and maybe even some of the folks that are watching.
Yes, I hope so too. I always have a good time. I'm, though we might be concluding this series, certainly it's not our last conversation. I appreciate you so much, and thank you for being such a good collaborator as we've tried to work through solving some things and solving some problems, and it's just refreshing because I think all the things that we've sort of talked about today happen in our meetings, and I think we've gotten to some pretty good solutions with that.
Yeah, and thank you. Thanks for entrusting me to be your partner.
I love when you say that.
Anyway, friend, as always, a real pleasure. And until next time.
Until next time, thank you.
You cut me loose and set me free.